See you. I'm down here in Victoria because this is my home state. I was born in Footscray Hospital and lived in Williamstown for the first 10 years of my life, so it's great to be back in Victoria. But I'm only down here on this one occasion to announce to you all that the United Australia Party has been registered by the Victorian Electoral Commission and will be contesting the state election. We'll be standing in the 8 regions in the upper house, and we believe on the back of Senator Babbitt's victory in the federal election that we've got the votes to win a couple of seats in each area. When we consider the last federal election, it was a time when Australians didn't know that the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, had appointed himself to multiple portfolios, had breached the trust of the Australian people. We've only got to look to Western Australia to see what happens to a Liberal Party that does that and that moves dramatically to the left, and that's what's happened in this state. Our party and Craig Kelly and others have been at the forefront in Victoria in fighting against the most repressive government in the Commonwealth that seeks to lock people up and seeks to destroy the chimes of freedom. So we're standing in this election because we believe no matter who you vote for in the lower house, be it Labor or Liberal, you must vote for the United Australia Party in the upper house to have the protection that you need for you and your family, to make sure that Dan Andrews doesn't run amok after the election, and to make sure that freedom prevails in this state. And there's been no other party in the Commonwealth of Australia that's protected and defended the rights of Australians that we have. We've got a very large membership in Victoria, over 23,000 members at last count. We believe that it's time to make a change for the better for Victorians, and we've accepted that. I'd just like to introduce our Victorian Senator, Ralph Babet, to give you a couple of words. Of course, if you want questions, Ralph will be on, and then we'll be announcing our leader. I should just announce our leader for the election will be Geoff Shaw, the former Liberal member of the State Parliament, will be leading our team in the upper house. And I'll just now ask Senator Babet to come on board. Huh?
G'day everyone. Thank you, Clive.
Thanks.
Chairman of our party, Clive Palmer. Now, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen, who are we? Who are we? We are tired. Who are we? We have suffered. Who are we? We are fed up. Who are we? We are the downtrodden. Who are we? We want change. Who are we? We want our voices heard. Who are we? We are looking for hope. Who are we? We are ready for something new. Who are we? We are Victorians. That's who we are. And we've had enough. We Victorians have had enough of the lies, the cover-ups, and the corruption. We Victorians are sick of living our lives under a man whose incompetence is only matched by his ability to deny responsibility for the mess that he and he alone has created. The man who can't recall when asked important questions. We Victorians are sick of the economic mismanagement. Our state is in more than $100 billion of debt, more than any other state in our Commonwealth. We Victorians have had enough of the government interfering in our lives, our businesses, our homes, with absurd overreach like the permanent pandemic powers, which has enabled one man to act like a quasi-dictator. We Victorians have had enough of the erosion of our parental rights and having our children exposed to inappropriate sexualised content in the classroom. We Victorians have had enough of one man, his government, and his clear incompetence as a leader. The red shirt scandal, Sluggate, hotel quarantine, no ambulances, school closures, toxic soil in the West, the Belt and Roads fiasco that resulted in the federal government having to step in and block the deal, a health system on the verge of collapse after years of neglect, elective surgery wait lists as long as your arm, suicides, family breakdown, misuse of public funds, cover-ups, closed small businesses, bankruptcies, divorces, closed playgrounds, closed beaches, 5 kilometres from your home, curfews, the most locked down city the world has ever seen. The list just goes on. Who are we? We are Victorians. We want to move on. We want to heal. We want room to breathe and to live our lives without fear. Fear of what this man will do next. Fear for what new level of political incompetence he will take us to as a state, as a people. Victorians will remember this November. They will never forget what they went through. Victorians will make their voices heard. Victorians, Chairman Dan, Teflon Dan, he's got to go. Now, ladies and gentlemen, members of the press, it gives me great honour to present to you the man who will take the political fight to the supreme leader of the People's Socialist Republic of Victoria, a man whose bravery, fortitude, and sheer love for his state and his country cannot be doubted. A man who, through sheer force of will, is going to stand in the arena of public discourse and politically challenge the authoritarianism and political incompetence of Chairman Dan. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Geoff Shaw. Thanks, Geoff.
Well, some couple of familiar faces from way back. I'm here standing for the state of Victoria. You know, for many years we've suffered, and we're still suffering as Victorians, of policies that have destroyed families, small businesses and jobs. And those policies are the direct result, and they lay at the feet of Dan Andrews and his Labor cohorts. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here today to stop that. And after 20 years in Parliament and 10 of the last 14 years as Head of Health in Victoria, Dan Andrews continues to fail Victorians. A hospital system behind, not because of lack of funding, but because of poor policies and poor decisions. Ridiculous decisions. And they fall right at those feet of Dan Andrews. An education system that teaches our young children things that movies and TVs shows would have to rank and be classified as MA. Let our children be children. Let them be active in things that stimulate learning instead of polluting the mind. Let them excel in English, maths and science, history and geography, art, music and sport. Let them compete on the world stage. Let them live productive lives and be constructive instead of being hamstrung by policies of Dan Andrews and his Labor cohorts. I want what many Victorians want. And Victorians want a leader that will guide them to a better future. Not one that demands his subjects to jump to attention when he speaks. A leader that will show compassion, not one that belittles and talks down to his peasant subjects. Not one that propagates line slogans like, "We're all in this together." A leader that will speak the truth instead of spewing forth some government department's failed modelling. A leader that will inspire instead of one that instills fear and instills division. A leader that will not release the police to shoot down its own citizens with rubber bullets through the streets of Melbourne. A leader that would not place unheard of fines to small businesses that happen to serve someone that doesn't have a certificate, or huge fines against people who won't wear a face mask correctly. A leader that would not jail male and female citizens for up to 22 days for being out of their 5 kilometre zone or opening up their church. Victorians want a leader that would not segregate citizens into two classes, calling some essential and some not essential. And then further segregating between those who were vaxxed and calling the one economy the vaxxed economy and not let unvaxxed people participate. Victorians want a leader that wouldn't bully its citizens, particularly women, because of their beliefs, causing division and further division in society. Simply, I'm standing because I'm fed up with Dan Andrews, unlike a lot of Victorians. I'm standing because we can do better than Dan Andrews, who has spent all but 3 years of his post-university life in the public purse. No business experience, no other work experience outside the Labor Party and politics. Never again should we be told by Dan we can't go to our family or friends' funeral. Never again should our wedding dates be cancelled because Dan says so. Never again should we be told by Dan that our kids can't go to school. Never again should we allow Dan to shame individuals because of their beliefs or because we disagree with him. Never again do I want Dan or his Labor donkeys running Victoria. We want to bring economic certainty and freedoms to all Victorians. Now, I know there's many Labor voters who are sick of Dan Andrews. They don't want to vote for him, but they're not going to be voting for the Libs. Also, I know a lot of Libs disillusioned with the way the Liberal Party have marched to the left, marched to Labor's tune, who don't want to vote Libs, but they're not going to vote for Labor. I'm calling out to you today that we want you with us, with the United Australia Party. You who are disillusioned with the Labor Party and with the Libs, we want you to come to us. And next week, I'll be announcing our candidates that will be standing for all 8 upper house seats in Victoria. I myself will be standing for the Northern Victorian region. And the reason I'm doing that is because it's the largest seat in Victoria. It takes up 44% of Victoria. And I want to stand for all Victorians, not just like I was before in Frankston, which was great, but for all Victorians. If I can stand in the biggest seat, that's what I want to do and represent the people of Northern Victoria and, in fact, Victorians in general. Thank you very much for your attention. And if you'd like to put any questions to Senator Babet, Clive or myself, go ahead.
I'm not sure who wants to answer this, but was the millions of dollars you spent on the federal campaign worth it for one seat?
I think it's worth it, but sorry.
Thanks.
You've got to understand what politics should be about. It should be a battle of ideas. And certainly the ideas that were being put forward at the last election, we had ideas that we thought we could contribute to. If you remember the last election, we said that interest rates would rise, that Australian homes are under threat, and that's exactly what's happened. If you remember the last election, we said we should bring home some of our super from overseas to reinvest it in Australia. And that's what the Treasurer Chalmers has already announced he's doing. So certainly those ideas were worth putting forward. The fact that some of them have been taken up by the current federal government is a good thing. And I congratulate them for doing so. Also, we've got to understand that Australia really is a democracy. We can have a battle of ideas, you can be different, and people can have that. And the press should encourage that. There's nothing more important to democracy than a free press. We saw earlier in this week in the Financial Review an article saying democracy was dead in Australia. We saw a photograph too of Peter Dutton having his press conference in Canberra with 250 members of the press across the aisle, but none of them attending his conference. And that's a sad thing for our democracy. The press do have a responsibility for the right to know to all Australians, and they should attend these things when the Leader of the Opposition says something. So again, I'm trying not to be political biased, and I'm trying to talk about the concept of ideas and democracy. So I'm very happy about it. I'm very happy with Senator Babbitt, and I'm sure that the United Australia Party can play a critical role at an important moment for Victoria. And if you look at Senator Babbitt's vote, we should be getting a number of seats in the upper house, and of course we can put the brakes on what's been happening here and protect people's freedom. So what value do you put on people's freedom? Thank you.
Do you expect similar kind of funding for this Victorian election?
No, Dan Andrews has rigged things by saying that really only the unions can donate to his party. But I think people know what we stand for in Victoria. They know what Senator Babbitt's leadership's been since he's been elected, and they'll see more of that in the coming days. And I think people are a bit concerned about the excesses of the state government. They're looking for someone to bring them into line. I'm sure we can do that.
Given the donation situation in Victoria, how much do you intend to spend on campaign in Victoria?
Well, I'll be donating $4,250 to the campaign. It's not for me to spend it though. It's up to the people in Victoria how they decide to spend it.
Geoff, you were suspended from Parliament and you've been caught up in some misuse of taxpayer funds. Why should people trust you? Why should they vote for you?
Wow, gee, that's a drop in the ocean now, isn't it, when we see what Dan Andrews has actually done and all his cronies? Really, we're asking that question where I had an ombudsman's report and I had the public prosecution drop all that because they found no evidence for for that. But there's plenty of evidence for the 800 deaths that Dan Andrews did during the hotel quarantine lockdowns. The Ombudsman has put across to Dan Andrews and his cohorts. The red shirts, the $380,000 that red shirts does. So if we're going to talk about $2,000, which was dropped, they should be looking at the Labor Party and be saying, wow, look what they have done. Look what they continue to do. Look how we suffer now. And that suffering that Labor put on to the people of Victoria, they did just to me during that period of time.
So it's okay to misuse taxpayer funds if it's only $2,000?
I think what you didn't hear was my first part of the answer to that, was that the Ombudsman went through that and the public prosecution went through that and they dropped it. The ones that picked up saying, no, naughty boy, you need to fix this up, was a parliamentary committee made up of my enemies, of course, Liberal Party and Labor Party. So you work that out. Whatever you want to write, you write. But that's pretty simple. We're two independent bodies, the police, public prosecution, and the Ombudsman have said nothing to answer for. Yet the geniuses that we have in Parliament now say, well, we think you do have something to answer for, and you'll be the first person in 100 years to be suspended from Parliament in Victoria.
So is that a good record if you were suspended from Parliament? Why should people vote for you?
Well, as I've just mentioned before, we want to have a look at what the Labor Party is now, and I want to be blocking Dan Andrew from destroying more people's lives in Victoria, from ripping off the system which he's done. We have a debt in Victoria that has gone up 5 times since he has been leader. 22 billion. Dennis Napthine left the state with a debt of 22 billion. It's now over 110 billion. How can you trust Labor with that? How can you trust Labor? All we can see is Labor doing more of that. Is there going to be more deaths under Labor? Is there going to be more family breakup under Labor? Is there going to be more hospital breakdowns under Labor? Is there going to be more red shirts scandals under Labor? You want the question you should ask, can you trust Labor again?
Yeah.
So how many seats do you expect to realistically win in the upper house?
Well, we're running for all 8 seats, and we want to be winning all of those seats. We want to have a candidate winning in all of those seats.
If I just say something there to help you, is that Senator Babet, of course, was elected number 6 on the ticket for all of Victoria, right? So there are 6 vacancies in each of the districts. So it's logical to imagine that we'll win the 6th seat in every area. And since the last federal election, we've seen the revelations from Scott Morrison, his shadow minister for 110 ministries or whatever he was, right? So we don't think any Liberals will vote for them again. But I just want to say about Geoff, before we made Geoff the leader, we looked at all those things that you've raised, and there's just nothing to it. One of the penalties you pay in Australia for speaking out, for protecting the people and being independent, is the wrath of the people that will do nothing and be nobody. And of course, the press needs to look at the ultimate end of all of these things, and they're just politicians playing around with politics. What we're interested really is serving the community and protecting individuals from the very danger that they've been under with Dan Andrews, I think. What do you think, Ralph?
Absolutely. And how much have we suffered? I mean, it's very easy to sit here and talk about all different things hypothetically, but think back over the last 2 years. Think back what you as Victorians, and all of you that are sitting at home right now watching, think of what you went through. Think of how you couldn't leave your house. Think of all the economic mismanagement. Think of the fact that we're $100 billion in debt, and that has to be paid back. And who's going to pay that back? You are, and your kids are. We can't leave this man in charge of our state any longer. We have to be able to challenge him in the upper house, and that's what we're doing. We're going for the balance of power in the upper house so we can block the worst of it when it comes through from whichever political party potentially forms government. So that's why we're here. We're a check and a balance against the corruption and against the mismanagement that we have seen over the last God knows how long, years. Thank you.
And Mr. Palmer, who will you preference? What parties will you preference?
Well, we're currently in negotiations finalising our preferences, so I couldn't really announce them today, but I'm sure they'll be announced during the campaign. And I hope that you'd come along in such great numbers again for that announcement, because that could be exciting. And I can say there's some exciting policy announcements coming down the track in the campaign, some really new, good and innovative things that Geoff wants to put into the mix for Victoria. And whoever forms the government in Victoria, we think that they should be prepared to listen to what can be done to reduce the debt, to create productivity, and also to bring Victoria up to where it should be in the nation. You've got to remember that this state was once the premier state of Australia, and it's fallen a long way from those lofty heights. And Victorians should be looking to reclaiming that position, you know. And it's great to come down here to launch the party. I'd like to come down and watch the football, but my wife won't let me. But nevertheless, you know, I'd like to be here and see it. I was born in Footscray, and I remember playing football in the juniors at Footscray. It was a great experience. But when I got to Queensland, they converted me to rugby league. But I've missed real football ever since. But nevertheless, that's another story.
What do you think of the integrity in Victoria and does it need improvement now?
Well, I think, well, just generally Victoria, but also the country, we need people to act on conclusions rather than allegations and slander. Because what you find, the press is often misled through no fault of their own, because people make different allegations. It's hard to work out what's happening. So we need to, you know, if people are engaging in bad activity, or if you like, they should be charged, and we should respect the results of the courts. Right? It's enough today in politics just to slander people and to continue these things on, and the public doesn't really know what's happening. So, again, that takes from the responsibility that journalists have to protect the people's right to know. It's not just the right to know what's sensational; it should be the right to know what people's integrity is.
Does the party intend to engage in any preference whispers ahead of the election?
No, we won't. We don't whisper. We've got a policy. I can say that the United Australia are not a party of whisperers. Of course, you couldn't say that Senator Babet here is a whisperer. I'm sure you all heard everything he had to say, right? So we certainly won't whisper at it. And certainly, you don't want backroom deals. You want straightforward politics where people can exercise their democratic rights. They can know what you stand for. And I think when it comes to lockdowns, vaccines, all of those sorts of issues and freedom issues, they know where our party stands. They know because whether you agree with us or you disagree with us, at the time those things were happening in our society, Craig Kelly was down here addressing 250,000 Victorians in front of Parliament House. And we ran extensive campaigns across the country stating out what our views were. So we're not Johnny-come-lately jumping on those issues. Our people in Parliament stood up. Craig Kelly stood up in the federal Parliament, made a courageous stand on putting forward what we believe in. Right? So we're very much flagging what the United Australia Party is about, so people can reject it or they can accept it. But that's what democracy is about, and that's what it means to be an Australian. So that you've got the right to choose, and they've got the right to know through the press. Any more questions?
Is it fair to say that the party will be prefacing Labor last on the basis of your comments?
Well, I certainly think there's a great groundswell of people that object to people that are in favour of the activities that Dan Andrews did. But it's not for me to decide, because it'll be decided by Victorians in the final analysis where the preferences will go. But our rhetoric in most of our members is certainly against lockdowns, right? Against mandatory vaccinations, against the closure of small businesses and fines. And we think that there's a danger with an Andrews government that he'll resurrect those things at some time in the future. And the real question is this just about the vaccine, or is it just a conditioning to get Victorians ready for the next thing that they want to do to them? So these are things that are concerns. And as I said, whether you vote Labor or Liberal in the upper house, you should vote for the United Australia Party, because you know very definitely that we will protect your freedom.
Yeah, do you mind if I just ask you, what do you think on Matthew Guy?
Personally, I like Matthew Guy. I'm finding his leadership lacking. I'm finding the Liberal Party lacking in this election. They're nowhere to be seen, they're nowhere to be heard. I don't think a $2 transport policy is really the game changer for them.
So you don't think they could realistically win the election?
Well, look, we're about our game. We're about winning the upper house for us. So that's what we're going to concentrate on. What the other parties do, where they fall, that's up to them.
Can you talk about the key differences between the Liberal Party and the UAP?
The key differences between the
Liberal Party and the United Australia Party?
well, there's many differences. One is that the Liberal Party seem to be marching to the beat of Labor regularly, constantly. They have disillusionment all over the place. If you've spoken to any of their members, disillusionment everywhere with their membership base. So we're far from that. What the Liberal Party have done is march to become more like Labor, where there's hardly a difference, and they've left a big gap behind, a big wake behind as they've left, and that's the gap that we're filling. We want the people who are disillusioned with the Liberal Party, and we want those who are never going to vote for Dan Andrews in the Labor Party. They're our people.
I must say we also want the Labor voters as well
Yes.
to realise they can vote for us in the upper house and still vote for the Labor Party if they want to. In Australia, you tend to have your politics emblazoned on your bottom when you're born. You know, you've always been a Labor family, you've always been a Liberal family, right? It's not the Labor way, it's not the Liberal way, it should be the right way. So we encourage Victorians to think that maybe it's time for a difference and maybe it's a time for a change. All right, thanks very much, ladies and gentlemen. God bless you all. Right?
Thanks.
That's it.
Thank
We
you.
might shoot out here.
Yep.
Well, thanks. We'll come through here.